Hi guys, so it's been a while since I've actually done anything video wise, well, one of the main things is I've been working on my Phantom 1.5 project, which is now all done and dusted and finished, but this particular video is about what I've been doing with my Xugong. Now anyone who's been following along will have known that the last time I flew my Xugong I crashed it completely. Basically the prop slipped off, caused a bit of a problem, fell from probably about 200 feet up in the air or something like that. Fortunately landed on soft ground, but yeah, kind of knocked my confidence somewhat. The issue for that was because I wasn't using what I now have. These are T-Motor 2216s, but I didn't have the counterclockwise adapters, which also have a little bit more of a grip for the flat blades. My own fault. It held on all three, but there was just one particular blade that caused a problem. Anyway, what you can see in front of you is, as you can see, no longer a Xugong. Looking over here, here's the shell. Basically the shell survived, no major problems. Couple of the little tabs inside here, not that particular one, but the ones on the bottom actually snapped off in the accident. Other than that, everything survived fairly well. The reason that I haven't built the Xugong again, two things. Number one, size. That is the Xugong frame there. This is what I've come up with. Number two, these dampeners. I like the Xugong. I think it's a good product. I think it's a clever idea. It's designed for a purpose of just FPV. It's not designed to have really brushless gimbals, big batteries, anything like that. It's designed to be what it is. They did a great job of designing for what it was. I still personally think that the space inside was too small for the NASA which it was designed around. Again, if you want to watch the review of the actual Xugong, by all means do. You'll see how I put it together. Anyway, I personally want to fly with a brushless gimbal. I want to be able to fly with FPV. I want to be able to fly with a slightly larger battery. The other problem that I had personally, and I think a number of people have also had it, is the centre of gravity on this thing was causing me real issues. It was more because of the extra weight that I had on it and the extra equipment, so again you can't really blame ImmersionRC for that in the design aspect of it. But you had the frame itself held, the propellers were held on by this frame, by the rubber dampeners. You then had the big 4000 mAh 4S sticking out the back of it. The problem is with that is that the CG was very difficult to find. It was always really far back, and the big problem with the NASA is the NASA, as it says in the instructions, likes to be as close to the CG as it possibly can be. The net result is basically a lot of people, including myself, especially myself, had an oscillation problem, and it was very difficult to tune it out. Gains adjustment would do so much, but there was still a very, if you put it into anything like high gains, when you were yawing around you were finding a lot of vibration. The next problem that you had is if you were up in the wind, because there was quite a bit of weight hanging on the bottom of it, everything's hanging by these dampeners, you get hit by a gust of wind and all of a sudden, boom, you get a wobble, and there's no way of stopping that wobble. It's just purely wind impacting the side of this and wobbling it. Even when the NASA can cope with it, it's going to make a movement, and it was a visible movement that unfortunately I just couldn't get away with. So again, I can't really blame ImmersionRC because I was doing something that was way outside what they were designing it for. But personally I wanted something a bit bigger, a bit more bulky, and could handle a little bit more equipment. However, I still love the fold down design. The biggest problem is that this Phantom goes in a case, fits perfectly. The Xugong went in a case, fitted perfectly, really nice, but it just couldn't hold the payload, it couldn't cope with the weight. I've got a 5400 mAh 4S lying around, big bulky battery, plenty of flight time from it, but there's no way I could ever have strapped it onto this apart from on the underbelly of it. I tried it once, it was so heavy, it was just the weight distribution was all out. It put it up to about just under 2 kilograms in fact, and this frame is not designed for 2 kilograms of weight. You know, 1500, 1600 no problems, but 2 kilograms, it was just killing it. So yeah, anyway, so what I've done, basically, as the keen of eye will see, what I've done is I've taken the aluminium frame and the folding arms. I did a repair on them, had to bend them out, they were somewhat out of shape, and what I've done is I've taken my F450, which for those who have seen my other videos will have known I had a kind of layered thing. So this top plate here, this is an F450 power distribution board. This particular plate that we're staring at right now has no power distribution going through it whatsoever. This is the top plate of my craft now. So what I've done is, I've literally drilled holes in the power distribution board, and then I've put some bolts on the back of it, just like it used to go through the old power distribution board. So this was the Xugong power distribution board, so there were holes, boom, 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 boom. But basically I've decided to give a bit of a risk, and I'm going to go with no dampening whatsoever. Why am I doing that? Frankly, the F450 didn't have any dampening and it was really good. These are a little bit more spindly, these are a little bit thinner, there's a flexible joint. How it holds up to it, who knows. It worked fine for the actual Xugong, so I don't really see why, if I've got good balanced props and a good CG, I can't see why this could be any worse than it was before. Time will tell. Hopefully I won't land in a horrible accident. So anyway, so that's what I've done. So I've placed that on top of the power distribution board. What I've then done to, let me just get down here, to mount the board is I've got, in fact let's go down here. Here we have 30mm male to female spacers. So they've got brass fixings in them. And basically that's just spaced out the board, so that means that if I just take this down a little bit further and I just come around, just rotate it, we've got all the gubbins, NASA, PMU V2 is in there. You can see in the image here that I've raised the PMU V2 and the NASA actually up on spacers. Now the reason I've done that is because I didn't want them banging into the soldering joints for all the power. So it raises it up above it. It means that you've got a little bit of space to route your cables. Bit of a tight fit, and your best bet, rather than me trying to show you all of this on this particular video, is to take a look at my blog and take a look at the pictures from when I was building it and when I had the top off. Other than that, we've got my usual DIY GPS mount. That is literally 2.5-inch poster box lid. So one of those tubes you get if you order a poster online, you'll get a 2.5-inch lid, and then you just cut a little groove in it. I was lucky enough to find a piece of plastic, but you could just cut a hole, 2.5-inch hole in that plastic, and you've got a nice mount there. Underneath it is my Shapeways NASA V2 LED, which is actually stuck to the bottom of this plastic using Velcro. Hopefully it's not going to cause any interference on that. But that means that I can see the light. This is available on Shapeways. The LED light points downwards, so when it's up in the air I get a much clearer image of it. Other than that, we'll move on to the camera equipment. So as we can see, we've got our 600 TVL, so that's the one that comes with the Fat Shark Predator V2 kit. That's going to be my eyes in the sky, as it were. Now this bracket here, that's actually the bracket that came with the Xugong kit. So that's the one that's supposed to hang off the side here when you've got the brushless, the servo gimbal on the front of it. So I used that. I found, again, I was quite lucky, raided the garage, found a bit of plastic, L-shaped, very lightweight piece of plastic, managed to sort of retrofit it and plumb it in there. So I slid this in there, cut a little groove, put a hole, put a screw, job's a good one. This you'll see here, this is a Payload G3, as I have reviewed, played with, messed with plenty of times. Check out my other videos for that. I'm still not completely 100% set on this gimbal. I haven't really had enough time to choose to test out the 1.25 firmware, which will hopefully solve the roll drift. The only flight I ever used, which I actually managed to get up in the air, was the one that I crashed. It yawed round and it looked a damn sight better than it normally does, but unfortunately about 30 seconds after that it crashed. Again, you can see that on my YouTube channel if you want to put yourself through some amusement. So yeah, so I've got the that's going to be independent. I do have the LED, the USB cable that does plug in the side of this, and I could run this as my FPV camera. The only problem with that, even though this is a blooming beefy old gimbal and it will take it without major problems, I don't love the USB hanging out the side of it and putting strain on it. Biggest problem is where you route the cables and giving yourself enough slack on the cables and making that permanent. So I'm going to give it a go with the 600 TVL, see how that is. 600 TVL itself, of course, goes into my Fat Shark 250 milliwatt transmitter, which is in one of my transmitter holdings. That's another one. These are all Shapeways parts that I sell. And we've got the ImmersionRC antenna sneaked in the background there, IOSD Mini, and that is all wired into the PMU V2. That's actually cable comes out with the PMU V2 here, goes around, goes into that. So as you can see, relatively decent use of space. I've still got a bit of room. This is where I'm likely to put the Zenmoose GCU if I decide to get rid of the Feotech. This top board here, this is the Feotech board. What I've done is I've actually trimmed it down, so I've literally got a Dremel out and I've chopped off bits of it that weren't needed, so it now fits on top of here. All I've done is I've put a foam pad to insulate it slightly. The key is that you have to get this cable down underneath, because that comes from just in here. So that has to come up from the actual gimbal controller motor, but as long as you can do that, you can get it in there, and then you've still got your up and down buttons, so you can still move up and down. I've tried it out, it all powers up, no problem. What else shall we show you? Landing gear. Landing gear, if I just get down a little bit lower. Landing gear got ruined pretty much in the crash, so I plumped for the same option. Now this landing gear is the good old DJI cheap and cheerful £12 landing gear, and what I've done is I've chopped a considerable amount off it. To be honest, I could have probably left a little bit more on it if I'd wanted to, but personally I like to keep things fairly sleek, fairly low. There's a reasonable amount of ground clearance. Certainly there was more ground clearance than there was on the Xugong when I actually did it, and if I wanted to I could use a bit of sugaroo and I could actually bulk up this a little bit. Main reason for wanting to keeping it nice and low to the ground is if we actually line it up next to the Phantom. So if we take a look at the height, at the moment that's nice and low, and the point is that I want this to be able to go in a case nice and easily. The Phantom fits in one of my Mapling cases, no problem at all, so I could use that as a height reference, and I think actually keeping this a little bit lower is actually worked out quite nicely. But maybe a little booster, I could even put some table tennis balls on there if I wanted to, for you know, muddier ground and things like that. Plenty of options that I've got. And then let's go to the bottom board, as you will probably have already seen, and there is our battery. Now the way that I've done these legs is I've used the actual power distribution board. So this is another F450 power distribution board. The reason I've used two power distribution boards is because these holes line up to start with. The top boards have a slightly different dimensions between each of the holes, so you have to use, as I did, you have to use these slightly flexible nylon spacers with brass inserts in them to be able to kind of make it fit properly. You just bend them out slightly. Not a major problem to do, but of course if you use the top boards and you use two top boards, then you get these nice little winglets which give you, as we can see, an overhang for a gimbal and a back hang for something else. And then if you use another power distribution down here, you get these other winglets left and right, and all the holes line up absolutely fine. Likewise, you can get this frame onto the top board of a 450, but it's going to leave you with less space to play with, basically. This worked really well actually, so I would highly recommend just grabbing yourself two sets of top and bottom board if you fancy doing this yourself. If you've got a Xugong and you want a bit more space, never harmful having one of these boards lying around, and both of them were capable of doing power distribution. It's just I've only chosen to use the middle one here to actually do it. On the bottom I have got, this here is a top board, so I have had to bow these out slightly, not too badly, but the idea is that basically these legs here provide a buffer, so they're a bump stop for the battery. So this is the same 4000 zippy compact 4S that I was using in the Xugong. Now what I've done is I've left a buffer here on this side, and then if I swing it around here to the side with the battery, hopefully you'll be able to see this. What you can see is what I've done is I've actually taken the buffer out here. The reason I've done that is so I can actually I'll just lift it up slightly. Oh, the camera's going to go wobbly. So if I lift it up and just lean against the wall for a couple of seconds. So there we go. So now you can see, so basically I've now got Velcro strap to the bottom. All I've got to do is undo that. I've got these tucked into the legs at the moment, but because I've removed with a Dremel these buffers, so these buffers here, what it means is that this sits nicely up against it, and it really is the perfect size for this battery. So what I have to do now, slide out, job's a good one. Best thing is if I literally drop it, it ain't going anywhere. So in flight all I need to do is have that one tab of Velcro, and that is not going anywhere. A little bit of movement side to side, but it's not going to be a major problem. So that's how I've done that. So let me just pop that down. Get it back on the ground. Okay. So that's the principle of it. And the only other thing that I'm going to mention on it is the whole point of me doing this is obviously the folding design is one thing, but the centre of gravity, which is the thing that was really causing me the most problems with the setup I had on the original frame. I'll just line that up again. And when you see the size of the frames, you can see, given that this is the same frame that was on that, you can see the space you've got to play with in comparison. The real issue was the centre of gravity, because the way it would line up here is exactly like that. The difference would be is that you'd have the battery, and I've got a second one here, you'd have the battery in the back here, like that, which didn't even really fit properly, even if it's pushed all the way up to the firewall. So I've actually managed to actually get the firewall in on the way that I'd done it. Most people just took that firewall out so the battery could come forward a bit, but it was smashed into the NASA, which is something that I wasn't particularly happy with, especially with my current crash rate. So yeah, the centre of gravity was just causing problems. So by doing it this way, and by having the battery laying right across the centre on that centre plate, everything on this now is really nicely centred. So the NASA is sitting where it wants to be. It's sitting in the centre of gravity. The legs don't cause problems. The gimbal weighs forward. As you could see when I put the battery in, there's a tiny amount of movement, and the best thing is that if I did find that there is a problem with the centre of gravity, what I also have the option of doing is taking the battery out, and then I come down here, I can also choose to slide the battery in there and leave it with that bit of overhang, and that is how I get my 5400 in, by slotting it in that way, which just squeezes in on the top board. Obviously I've got to redo the Velcro and give a second option for that, but the point is it gives me the ability of kind of changing the configuration and moving the centre of gravity around, and that was just something that I really struggled with the original Xugong frame. Again, because I was using it for stuff that it wasn't meant really to be used for. My argument would be that most people who do this hobby, unfortunately, if they can afford two frames, then they'll have one FPV frame and they'll have one that's, you know, just a proper camera rig. Most people like as much as they can get on the whole damn thing. The Phantom is frankly the best way of doing that at the moment with a ZenMoosh gimbal, because it's got great CG. Now you can do a 1.5 conversion like I've done, so a V1.1 inside the shell of a Phantom 2. You really do get the best of both worlds, and you can use the Phantom 2 battery as well, and you can also use standard lipos. So if you're interested in that, just go and have a look at my my channel. There's much more information on how I went doing that. But anyway, so I mean, I feel hopefully the fact that I can now hopefully put these 11-inch blades on here, these T-Motor carbon fibre blades, lovely blades. Unfortunately they only did 2 flights before I stacked them and destroyed 2 of them. Hopefully this will give me really good lift. Time, flight wise, very difficult to say. Actually, once I've got that battery in there, this comes in at about, it was 1600 grams. So I've actually managed to make it almost 200 grams lighter than I had it when I had the battery in the Xugong. That's purely and simply by just being a little bit more careful with a few of the things that I've done. Actually, the frame itself, there is less material to this design because I'm using spacers. So that's probably the other place that I've managed to shave off a little bit of weight. So yeah. So hopefully I will be able to get some flight time over the next couple of days, and I'll also get some pictures and everything up. And then the best thing, of course, as I will demonstrate now, fold that in there. And then we've got a choice. I'd probably fold that in there. And there we go. We've got one folded up frame. So actually, if I take this, we take the Phantom. There we go. So we've got a 450 frame that actually fits inside a 350 sized Phantom in footprint, but can be folded out to be much bigger. And obviously, you know, you can't use 11-inch props on that Phantom. You can on this, and we'll see how much difference that makes. So stay tuned, and we'll see whether or not I end up crashing and burning again. But anyway, subscribe if you're interested.